The stars outside shimmered quietly, but the silence inside the space station felt dangerous. Lieutenant Carter adjusted his helmet and stepped forward, unsure of why the alarms had gone off in Sector 8. There were no signs of movement, no flashing lights, and no sounds, only a deep, cold stillness that made his heart beat faster. 2 days ago, Carter was celebrating his promotion with his unit. The Earth Alliance had declared peace with most alien factions, and Carter thought the wars were over. He had never imagined that his first command mission would begin with a distress signal from a dead zone near Jupiter. The moment his ship arrived, communications were cut. Something invisible jammed their frequencies, and power flickered across all decks. They were blind, deaf, and drifting in hostile space without warning. "Lieutenant, something's approaching," his pilot called out. A black shape slid across their radar, fast and silent, like a ghost in space. No ID tag, no communication, just motion. Carter ordered full shields and called for backup. But nothing came through. The ship rocked violently. Systems went offline, and the emergency lighting kicked in. They were under attack, but from what? No one could say. Explosions rang through the corridors as the crew scrambled for safety. Carter ran toward the engine room, helping a wounded engineer out of the smoke-filled hall. The emergency override failed, and he had to blast open the next door with a manual charge. When he stepped through, he froze. Standing at the heart of the engine bay was a tall figure in black armor, glowing with gold patterns. Her eyes were pale silver, unblinking, and her long white hair floated in the air as if weightless. Before he could raise his weapon, she lifted a hand not to attack, but to speak. Her voice rang out in his mind, calm but commanding, and it stopped him in his tracks. "I am not your enemy, human. You're in the wrong place at the wrong time." Carter hesitated, but something about her presence made him lower his gun. She looked like one of the high-born alien commanders, a race he thought had vanished after the last war. But why was she here, and why had she spared him? She pressed a symbol on her wrist, and Carter's helmet suddenly lit up with coordinates. "Your ship is leaking radiation. I'm stabilizing it. You'll live, but we must talk." Before he could ask more, the world around him faded to black as he collapsed. When he woke, he was no longer on his ship. He was aboard a vessel of alien design, surrounded by strange lights and soft humming sounds. His wounds were healed, and he was alone except for her. She stood at the center of the bridge, overlooking a star map with dozens of red warning signals. Her armor was now removed, replaced by a dark uniform covered in ancient symbols. She turned and said softly, "I saved you, not out of mercy, but because your kind has become the key." Carter sat up slowly, unsure of what she meant. "Key to what?" he asked, his voice dry and heavy with fear. She didn't answer right away, but walked toward him and handed him a small glowing disc. "This war isn't over," she whispered. "It's just beginning. And now you're part of it whether you want to be or not." Her eyes held a secret, and her calm face told him everything would soon change. Carter sat in silence, the disc glowing faintly in his hand. Its surface pulsed with energy, like a living heartbeat trapped in metal. He could feel something inside it, data, memory, maybe even a message meant only for him. The last pulse flickered, and the lights around him shifted to deep blue as the ship moved into faster than light travel. The female alien captain stood near the helm, her gaze locked on distant stars. Her presence was both peaceful and powerful, like a storm held tightly within armor. She didn't speak right away, allowing Carter time to adjust to the unfamiliar ship. He couldn't decide whether he was a prisoner, a guest, or something far more complicated. "You're awake earlier than expected," she finally said. Her voice was clear, almost soothing, but Carter noticed the hidden strength beneath her calm tone. She did not offer her name, but her insignia and medals marked her as someone important. He wondered why such a high-ranking figure would involve herself in a low-level human mission. "What do you want from me?" he asked. He didn't shout or demand. but spoke with the weight of someone pulled into something much bigger. The captain walked toward him, hands behind her back, expression unreadable. "I need your help, not your surrender," she replied. The air between them grew quiet as the ship's hum filled the space. Carter looked down at the disk again, its soft glow warming his palm. "What's inside this?" he asked, unsure if he wanted the answer. She paused, then answered without hesitation. "The coordinates to stop a war before it begins." That answer made no sense to him. The war had already begun when his ship was attacked, he remembered. The explosions, the chaos, and the look in his crew's eyes. Yet she insisted the real war had not started, not yet. "My name is Kalara," she said, finally giving him something real. "I am one of the last of the Lyran Guardians. We protect the edges of galactic balance." Carter didn't understand what that meant, but the words carried weight. She was not here by mistake, and neither was he. "Why me?" he asked again, quieter this time. Kalara's eyes softened, just slightly. "Because you're human. And that means you're unpredictable, dangerous, and necessary." The ship suddenly slowed, returning to normal space near a ringed planet glowing orange in the dark. Carter moved to the front screen, watching as several alien vessels floated. Nearby, each one looked different races, designs, colors, yet all part of a single fleet. "These ships aren't from your people," he said. "They're not. They're allies of necessity." Kalara replied. She turned to him and raised her wrist. A small projection lit up between them, showing maps of border systems and strange alien scripts. "These are the sectors already compromised. If we don't act now, the collapse will spread to your world." Carter's throat felt dry as he realized the scale of what she was showing him. The disk began to glow brighter, responding to the ship's systems. Kalara touched it gently and sighed. "This was meant for a Lyran, but it chose you." Carter didn't feel chosen. He felt lost, broken, and far from home. Still, something inside him refused to walk away from what was unfolding. "You saved me from death. Now you want me to save entire systems?" he asked. Kalara looked at him with steady eyes, her voice soft. "No. I want you to walk beside me while we try." He didn't have an answer, but his silence spoke louder than words. He was no longer just a soldier on a mission. Now he was a man bound by fate, by survival, and by something he didn't yet understand. And at the center of it all stood a captain whose calm strength pulled him into the unknown. Together, they had just stepped into the eye of something greater than any war he had ever imagined. The ringed planet outside rotated slowly, its surface lined with glowing energy fields. Carter stared through the large viewing screen, trying to understand the true purpose of their arrival. Kalara stood beside him, silent, as the ship gently descended toward a docking platform on a hidden orbital station. The soft hum of energy surrounded them as docking arms extended and locked into place. Inside the station, the air was cool and dry. The halls were carved from dark alloy and lit by hovering lights that shifted with their movements. Carter noticed that the station's design was unfamiliar. Unlike anything he had studied in Earth Alliance data, Kalara moved with purpose, guiding him through each corridor without hesitation. They entered a chamber filled with holograms and ancient relics. Different languages floated across screens, showing worlds Carter had never seen. A large sphere hovered in the center, pulsing slowly with light, like a sleeping heart. Kalara turned to face him and spoke softly. "This is the Watch Core. It sees patterns before they happen." Carter stepped closer to the sphere, feeling warmth radiate from it. A strange symbol lit up on its surface the moment he approached. It was the same symbol from the glowing disk she had given him earlier. The sphere responded to him as if it recognized his presence. "Why does it react to me?" he asked, his voice filled with confusion. Kalara folded her arms, her silver hair catching the chamber's light. "Because you carry the unknown. Human decisions break predictions. That is both gift and threat." Her answer made him feel more like a weapon than a man. Suddenly, the sphere flared bright red, alarming both of them. Kalara snapped her wrist upward and activated a control panel beside her. A series of alerts appeared on the screen communications from a nearby star. System. An outpost had gone silent. And one word kept repeating in Lyran script. Betrayal, Carter said. Reading the translation on the display, Kalara's eyes narrowed as she scanned the data quickly. We shared this technology with allies. Only a few had access. Someone turned against us. The sense of peace Carter had begun to feel cracked instantly. Was this outpost human? He asked. No, but if one falls, others follow. That's how they test our unity, she replied. Her tone was sharper now, not with fear, but cold focus. She moved toward a console and began entering emergency flight paths. Carter stepped beside her and studied the readings. A fleet had already begun moving near the compromised system. It wasn't a full attack, but more like a silent test to see who would notice. The kind of test meant to divide allies before a real strike. Kalara turned to him and asked a question he didn't expect. Would your people fight beside us again if the threat reached Earth? Carter hesitated before answering, unsure of what the Alliance would choose. We don't always act fast. But if the danger is clear, we fight back hard. She nodded, not surprised by his answer. Our enemies count on slow unity. That's how empires fall. The projection screen flickered again, this time showing the Human Alliance seal. A signal had been sent from Earth's side, but not from command. Carter leaned in and read the data stream. His name was embedded. In the transmission, someone from Earth had tried to track his last known location. He wasn't forgotten, but he wasn't safe either. Someone on my side sent that, he said quietly. Kalara stared at the code with a deep frown. They're looking for you. Maybe to bring you home. Or maybe not. The idea chilled him, knowing he might now be seen as a traitor. The room dimmed as the watch core returned to calm blue. Carter placed the glowing disk into a slot on the control board. Instantly, star maps adjusted, showing new paths branching off from the attack zone. It was guiding them somewhere, and Kalara followed without question, as the ship undocked and turned toward a new star. Carter stood near her in silence. He had been saved by her, but now he was being led deeper into a war he didn't start. And yet, a part of him had already chosen to stay by her side. Whatever came next, they would face it together, with no room left for betrayal. Asterisk. The stars blurred into long trails as the ship entered. Faster than light travel, Carter stood near the window, watching them stretch like silver threads pulled across a black canvas. His mind was quiet, but not calm. Every second pushed him deeper into the unknown. He didn't know the name of the system they were heading toward, only that Kalara called it the Fire Zone. Behind him, Kalara studied the disk's data on a floating interface. Each time the hologram pulsed, a new path opened, redirecting them across space. She moved quickly, tracing the network of shifting points with her fingers. Her armor had returned, sleek and black with glowing gold lines that pulsed softly in the dim light. Why is it changing? Our route? Carter asked, breaking the silence. Kalara turned slightly, her silver eyes glowing beneath the dim lighting. It's avoiding traps. Someone predicted we'd follow the original trail. The disk is rewriting its own map. He didn't understand how a piece of alien tech could think, but it clearly was. The ship exited warp and came to a slow drift near a dead planet. The surface was cracked like burnt glass, and broken towers lay buried in red dust. Carter stepped closer to the viewing panel, seeing flashes of old battlefields below, scars from a war long forgotten. Yet the silence still carried weight. This place once held a Lyran observatory. Kalara said, before the betrayal, before the silence, it watched the stars for threats. Now it was a graveyard, forgotten and erased from most star charts. But the disk had brought them here for a reason. They descended slowly through the thin atmosphere, scanning for power sources. Kaylara activated a ground scanner, revealing energy lines buried deep beneath the surface. The ship hovered over a collapsed crater filled with black dust and broken stone. Carter tightened his gloves and followed her as the ramp lowered. The air outside was dry, but breathable with a suit. Shards of glass-like minerals crunched under their boots as they walked. Carter saw markings on the stone, symbols that looked like a mix of human letters and Lyran glyphs. Kaylara knelt to inspect them, brushing off dust to reveal a hidden panel. This site was sealed before the war. She said without looking up, "It holds memories ones the disk can unlock. But only if it accepts us." Carter raised an eyebrow, unsure how a structure could deny access. Still, the moment she touched the panel, a deep hum echoed around them. The ground shook slightly as a circular door slid open before them, cold. Blue light spilled from within, revealing stairs that descended into the dark. Kaylara looked at Carter and nodded once before stepping inside. He followed without a word, the air growing cooler with each step. At the base of the stairs, a chamber opened with floating crystals suspended mid-air. Each crystal flickered with captured memories, battles, councils, moments of history sealed in light. The disk lit up brightly in Carter's hand, pulling toward a crystal in the center. When he touched it, a vision filled the room. An alien figure in golden armor stood on a battlefield, facing a monstrous fleet. Behind him, humans and Lyrans fought side by side, their weapons blazing. Carter recognized the human general. It was someone from old Earth War records, but the memory was clearer than any archive, as if the past itself was alive. "That's the Alliance of Fire," Kaylara whispered. "It was erased by those who feared unity. But now the truth returns." The vision faded, and the crystal dimmed back to silence. Carter held the disk tighter, knowing he had just witnessed a secret buried for generations. A sudden alarm echoed from their coms, sharp and high-pitched. Kaylara tapped her wrist, pulling up a live feed from the orbiting ship. 3 unknown vessels had entered their sector, weapons armed and locked. They had been followed, and whoever came wasn't there for peace. Kaylara moved fast, her voice firm and focused. "Back to the ship. We leave now. They can't find what we've unlocked." Carter ran beside her as the ground trembled above them from a nearby blast. Dust fell from the ceiling, but they didn't stop. As the ship lifted from the crater, enemy fire followed them through the sky. Carter manned a secondary turret, firing back with focused bursts of plasma. Kaylara pushed the engines to maximum. Her eyes locked forward. They didn't speak, but they moved as one, both bound by purpose and the truth they now carried. The ship's engines roared louder as enemy fire rained from above. Carter gripped the side panel near the turret console, his knuckles white. He had never flown through an atmosphere this unstable, especially under attack. Outside the viewport, bursts of red and white lit up the darkening sky. Kaylara leaned forward over the controls, navigating through a narrow canyon. Enemy fighters twisted behind them like shadows refusing to let go. She tapped into an emergency protocol that retracted the stabilizers and focused on raw speed. The ship jolted violently, but it gained the lead by inches. "I need clear shots," Carter said as he recalibrated the turret's aim. He focused on the nearest fighter, locked on, and released a stream of plasma rounds. The impact struck one of its wings, sending it crashing into the side of the canyon. Kaylara didn't turn to look, but nodded once in approval. Behind them, 2 more ships emerged from the clouds. They moved in perfect sync, clearly trained in high-speed pursuit tactics. "They're not pirates," Carter muttered, reading their flight behavior. "They're soldiers. Someone sent them knowing we'd come here." Kaylara didn't answer, but her silence said enough. She veered left toward a rocky outcrop that split into 2 narrow tunnels. One led to open skies, the other toward an energy rift barely detected on sensors. Without warning, she chose the rift. The moment they entered, the ship's lights dimmed and static filled the air. Carter's ears popped from the shift in pressure and gravity. Outside, Space twisted into streaks of violet, gold, and deep blue. The rift wasn't natural, it was artificial, a gate to somewhere uncharted. Where does this lead? He asked, struggling to stay steady. Kalara's hands danced across the glowing controls. To the vault of ashen stars. It's where the Alliance of Fire made their last stand. Carter's heart sank at the name, knowing no record of it had ever been confirmed. Behind them, the pursuing ships tried to follow, but the rift began collapsing. One ship vanished into the distortion, while the second barely escaped the edge. Kalara activated the phase lock, stabilizing their vessel mid-warp. The ride became smoother, but tension still pressed heavy on both of them. Carter looked to his left and noticed the disk was glowing. Again, this time it projected an ancient map, pointing to a sector hidden behind collapsed coordinates. Kalara leaned in, whispering something in her native tongue before translating. It's showing us the path to the last beacon. If it still exists, it holds the truth. They emerged from the rift into dark space. No stars shone nearby, only a dull red planet floating ahead with a cracked atmosphere. Strange towers poked from its surface like ribs of a long-dead giant. It didn't look like a place that welcomed life. Carter and Kalara landed the ship near a ruined structure. The dust outside clung to their suits as they stepped into the old base. Inside, they found shattered equipment and hollowed halls lit by failing lights. Then they heard it, a faint pulse echoing through the metal floors. Kalara followed the sound to a sealed chamber. She placed her hand on the scanner, but it rejected her access. Carter stepped forward and, without thinking, placed the disk into the console slot. The door opened slowly, recognizing his signal. Inside was a circular room filled with hundreds of capsules. Each one contained a memory crystal, sealed and untouched for centuries. In the center stood a terminal with the Alliance seal glowing bright. Kalara whispered, "They didn't die. They hid their knowledge here." Carter accessed the terminal and watched ancient files appear. Videos, treaties, and war records all played in front of him. He saw humans and Lyrans fighting as brothers, not enemies. The truth had been buried, but not lost. Suddenly, a shadow moved across the hallway camera. Carter tensed and drew his weapon. Kalara pulled up the surveillance feed and froze. A figure was watching them from the edge of the ruins. It wasn't human, and it wasn't Lyran. Its body was covered in dark armor with glowing red eyes. Kalara said only one word, her voice heavy. "Harbinger." Asterisk. The air inside the chamber turned colder as the figure stepped closer. Its movements were slow, deliberate, as though it had no fear of being seen. Carter held his weapon steady, eyes narrowed as he waited for a command from Kalara. The stranger stopped at the edge of the light and tilted its head slightly. Kalara stepped forward, speaking in an ancient tongue Carter didn't understand. The creature responded with the same language, its voice low and mechanical. The tone wasn't aggressive, but it wasn't friendly either. Carter sensed they were being warned, not welcomed. "He's a warden," Kalara said, lowering her voice. "Long ago, they were created to protect knowledge stored in sacred vaults like this one, but they were lost when the Lyran Empire fractured. No one has seen one in hundreds of years." The warden extended a hand and projected a symbol into the air. It was the Alliance seal burning, broken, and crossed by a dark mark. Carter stepped closer, studying the symbol's meaning. "It's corrupted," he said, noticing the shift in color and shape. Kalara nodded slowly, her face grim. "The Harbinger protocol has begun," she whispered. "It's a signal that knowledge has fallen into the wrong hands. Someone is activating ancient weapons." Carter's stomach turned at the thought of those weapons being used again. The vault was not just a memory bank, it was a trigger for something much worse. The warden began to walk away, motioning for them to follow. Its armor pulsed with red lines that flickered with each step. Down another long corridor, doors opened without resistance as the warden approached. He led them into a hidden chamber, shielded from all external signals. Inside, a stasis pod stood against the wall, humming with faint energy. Carter walked around it, wiping dust from the glass to see what was inside. He stepped back immediately when he saw the face of the figure sleeping within. It was human, or at least it used to be. His features were old but preserved, and a badge on his uniform read, Captain. Ryle in Earth script. Kalara stood still, shock frozen on her face. He was one of the first humans to join the Alliance of Fire, she said quietly, but he disappeared before the final battle. We thought he was dead. The warden placed a hand on the console and projected a series of logs. Each one showed transmissions from ancient battles, conversations between commanders, and finally betrayal. The voice in the last message belonged to a human officer Carter didn't recognize, but what he said chilled him. We were never supposed to win. Just delay them. Kalara clenched her fists, realizing what had happened. They sacrificed themselves to bury the truth and lock away what could destroy the galaxy. Carter stared at the sleeping captain and wondered if waking him would solve anything or make things worse. We can't leave him here, Carter said after a long silence. Kalara agreed, her eyes never leaving the stasis pod. But once we wake him, everything changes. His memory holds what no one else remembers. They began preparing the pod for transport back to their ship. Suddenly, the lights flickered and the warden turned sharply toward the exit. Kalara pulled up a live feed from their ship's external cameras. A new fleet had arrived, silent, unmarked, and surrounding the atmosphere above. They found us, she said without emotion. Carter grabbed the disc and secured it inside a case on his belt. Kalara powered the stasis pod and activated emergency lift protocols. The warden returned to the chamber door and locked it from the outside. He's protecting us with his final task, Kalara said. As they rushed back toward the ship, the floor shook beneath their feet. Rumbles echoed through the halls as the enemy began bombarding the planet's surface. Their vessel's AI sent an auto-alert detected damage, but still flight-ready. They had minutes before the vault was reduced to ash. The ramp sealed behind them as they launched into the red sky. Carter looked back and saw the vault collapse inward, glowing bright with one final pulse. He knew the truth was now inside their ship, and in the man sleeping in their cargo hold. The Harbinger had been activated, and the countdown had begun. The ship soared through dark space as silence filled the cockpit. Behind Carter, the stasis pod remained steady, glowing faintly with cold blue light. Kalara stood at the console, watching as the star charts shifted and plotted a return path. They had escaped the vault, but not the war that waited for them in the shadows. Carter sat down and removed his gloves, his hands still shaking slightly. The adrenaline had faded, but the weight of what they discovered pressed hard against his chest. He had seen a dead civilization awaken and watched ancient truths rise from ashes, and now they carried a man who might change everything. Kalara approached the pod, her fingers hovering over the control panel. She hesitated only a moment before activating the revival sequence. A soft hiss echoed in the cabin as steam curled from the edges of the pod. Captain Ryle's chest began to rise slowly, his breath shallow but steady. Carter stood beside her, eyes fixed on the sleeping figure. The pod systems beeped softly as sensors tracked the man's vitals. Kalara lowered the brightness to ease his transition. Ryle opened his eyes, blinking against the low light. He looked older than Carter had imagined, but stronger too. His eyes were sharp, scanning the room quickly before locking onto Kalara. "Leyrin," he whispered with a voice like dry stone. "Then I am not dead." Kalara bowed her head slightly in respect. "You survived the collapse of the Alliance," she said. "You've been in stasis for nearly a century." Ryle's face hardened, and he slowly sat up. His gaze moved to Carter, studying him with quiet calculation. "You're human, but not from my time. The Earth you know is not the one I left." Carter nodded, unsure what to say to a man who came from forgotten history. "I found your vault. We need your knowledge. The Harbinger protocol has started again. Rael closed his eyes briefly, pain flickering across his face. It was never supposed to rise again. We buried it in blood and fire. Kalara stepped forward and showed him the glowing disk. It chose him. The old ways still recognize his kind. Carter placed the disk into the console to replay the last memory. The chamber lit up with the projection of war, betrayal, and unity lost. Rael watched in silence, his jaw tight as old wounds reopened. When it ended, he stood without help, strength returning with purpose. You saw the truth. Rael said quietly, you understand what happens next. The Harbingers do not stop. They consume. Kalara pulled up a new star chart marked with red signals. Dozens of systems were going silent. One by one. They're moving fast, she said. They're not conquering. They're erasing. Rael clenched his fists and stepped toward the command console. Then we must make them remember what fear feels like. Carter looked at the two of them, unsure of his role now. I'm no hero. I was just a soldier on a scout mission. Rael turned to him, eyes hard but respectful. You're more than that. You're the bridge. The disk chose you for a reason. Kalara nodded in agreement. We cannot do this without you. Not as a weapon, but as a voice. Rael tapped into the old Alliance beacon system buried deep in the disk. A signal began to pulse outward, calling allies long thought dead. Carter watched the console light up with returning pings. One from a rogue AI colony. One from a hidden Terran fleet. One from an old Lyran rebel cell. The Alliance of Fire was waking again, not through orders, but belief. And he stood at the center of it all, no longer just a survivor. Kalara placed a hand on his shoulder, her touch steady and warm. Rael stared at the stars, then gave a quiet command to plot a course. To the heart of the Harbinger swarm. We strike before they erase the last beacon. The ship turned toward darkness, but this time, they were ready to light the fire again. Asterisk, the ship cut through silent space, moving toward the last recorded Harbinger swarm location. Carter stood beside Kalara at the main console, studying the enemy's movement across the stars. They had no fleet behind them yet. Only signals flickers of support slowly awakening. But the time for waiting had ended. Captain Rael adjusted his old armor, now patched with modern gear from the ship. He moved slower than before, but his mind remained sharp and focused. Every word he spoke carried the weight of wars long buried. We can't outrun what's coming. So we bring the fire to them. Kalara loaded the last crystal into the tactical core of the ship. Each memory shard held fragments of old Alliance tactics and codes. They now had ancient knowledge merged with human instinct, and Carter stood at the center of it, holding both past and future in his hands. The disk pulsed again, sending its final signal outward. This one was stronger, clearer, reaching across light years. It called not just to ships, but to people, those who remembered, and those who were ready to rise. The response came like whispers at first, then voices, then fleets. Small ships blinked into orbit near them, followed by heavier cruisers, II dreadnoughts, old Terran warships, rebel Lyran fighters, all answering the call. Carter stared at the growing alliance forming outside the viewport. It was no longer a forgotten cause. It was a living army. Kalara turned to him and spoke firmly. You led them here. Not with orders, with belief. Carter didn't feel like a leader, but he had learned leadership wasn't about control. It was about trust. And those around him had chosen to follow. Rael set coordinates to the center of the Harbinger swarm, a dark zone beyond map space, filled with collapsing stars and corrupted AI beacons. It was where the original collapse began centuries ago, and it was where this new alliance would make its final stand. As the fleet jumped together, Carter felt the gravity shift once more. When they exited warp, the sky ahead was filled with blackened ships and silent giants. The Harbinger swarm hovered like a storm, ready to erase whatever touched it. But now it faced resistance. Rael spoke through the Alliance channel, his voice calm but powerful. Today we do not fight for empires. We fight for memory, for choice, for the right to exist. Kalara opened the defense shields and armed the fusion lances. The first strike was theirs. Carter took the co-pilot seat and activated the neural sync module. His thoughts connected with the ship's targeting systems. Instantly, he felt every movement as if the vessel were part of his own body. And in that moment, he understood why the disk had chosen him. The battle exploded across the stars in a storm of light. Harbinger drones swarmed like insects, but the Allied ships held formation. For every loss, 2 more vessels filled the gap. Carter guided their fire with precision, each shot breaking enemy rhythm. Kalara's voice echoed across the bridge, calling commands and making rapid decisions. Her leadership was fierce and fluid. Like water flowing through fire, Rael directed squads toward weak points in the enemy lines. Their coordination turned chaos into strategy. Then the Harbinger core ship revealed itself, emerging like a ghost. It was massive, a planet-sized construct. With thousands of red eyes blinking across its hull, Carter felt a pulse in the disk, hotter than before. "It's calling to me," he said, without fear. Kalara moved closer and took his hand. "You're not going alone," she said simply. Rael transferred control of their ship's energy core to Carter's interface. Together, they charged straight at the Harbinger core. The disk lit up completely as they approached, merging with the ship's mainframe. Inside the enemy ship, systems failed one by one as Carter's signal disrupted the hive link. The final blow came. From within, not just power, but memory. The truth the Harbingers erased was now their undoing. The core shattered in silence, light bursting from within like a second sun. Across the battlefield, Harbinger drones froze and dropped lifeless. The war ended not in fire, but in truth. The silence that followed was peaceful for the first time in ages. Back aboard the ship, Carter sat beside Kalara as the stars slowly turned again. They had survived not just the battle, but the burden of ancient secrets, bound by fire, forged by choice. Their bond was no longer one of duty, it was something greater, something eternal between 2 lives that refused to break.